So in the following slides, I will talk about the life of Olga Dubreeth, and he was a Dutch botanist, and he's considered one of the first geneticists. He mainly is known for the following concepts. First, he proposed the idea of genes. He also rediscovered the law of heredity, and while he was doing that work, he was not aware of the work of Mendel, so it was a big surprise for him that somebody already did that type of work. And he also introduced the term mutation, studying these plants, and we will discuss why, although he was right about the concept, the mechanism of these plants, the phenomena that they use is something different. And finally, we will talk about the developing a mutation theory of evolution. Olga Dubreeth was a big fan of Darwin's theory of evolution through natural selection and also of his ideas of pangenesis. So he published a book called Intracellular Pangenesis, and I might ask you this name in one of the tests. So remember, as I said before, he was a Dutch botanist and he continued with the ideas of Darwin, at least in the beginning. Then he started diverging from the ideas of Darwin, and he considered that pangenes were the particles units of inheritance. And again, I'm not going to ask you the date, but I might ask you the title of this book in the test. And as I said before, finally, the third thing that I want that you remember, that based on a modified version of Charles Darwin's theory of pangenesis, he postulated that different characters have different hereditary carriers. And I will show you in the next slide which model organism he used. If you remember, Darwin used different doves, different pigeons, and different type of creatures to understand inheritance. In his case, Olga Dubreeth used different type of plants and the changing coloration on those plants. So he started doing something very similar to Mendel, and he started using bred through plants, and he used as a model organism not pea plants. He used this evening primrose, and he found that when he started crossing all these yellow plants, in the next generation he started getting these very weird change, this dramatic change in the coloration, and he considered that this was due to a mutation, and so that the inheritance might change very sudden and they could be dramatic changes. That is completely true, and I will show you that there are multiple examples. I have worked with multiple mutations, and in one generation you can see a dramatic change. However, although he was right about the observation that there was a dramatic change in one generation, and that this happened actually with some mutations, in this particular case, the mechanism is completely different. Yeah. Later, they found that there was not a mutation, there was a different mechanism in this particular plant. So, thing that I want that you remember is that Olga Dubreeth studied plant hybrids, and he mainly emphasized on this plant, the evening primrose, and this is the scientific term, the scientific name of this plant. And he found that there will be distinct traits when he true bred these plants, and that there was a sudden change. And he considered that that was a mutation, and although the data was correct, the mechanism was not, it was wrong. It was not because of mutation, it was because of another mechanism. So Olga Dubreeth and his work on these plants start differentiating his ideas from Darwin's ideas. Because if you remember, Darwin believed that the changes take place in a gradual way. And here he was observing very dramatic changes. And not only in the leaf color, in the flower color, also the leaf shape and the plant size were modified. And he considered that this could be a mechanism. So this type of change, if a mutation takes place and happen to the next progeny, you can get new species. And that was a mechanism that it was very interesting. So, however, as I said before, Well, Darwin considered that changes, that the variation was continuous. He was showing an example of a discontinuous variation. So they will be sudden changes in some traits. And now we know that although these changes, and I will show you multiple examples, do take place, in this case they was not due to a mutation, is due to a problem in a chromosomal segregation. So if you remember, I show you that when a cell go to mitosis and divide, you have your chromosomes here, and some of the chromosomes will go to one cell and the other one will go to the other cell. So he found what this change in coloration is because the chromosomes were not segregated in the right way. So it was not because of mutation, it was a different mechanism. However, as I said, this was a new idea that actually, as a concept, opened new doors and new areas of research. And if you remember, I told you that he was a big fan of Darwin. However, due to this research, he started getting very different ideas from Darwin. So he proposed the mutation theory of evolution, and he proposed that evolution give small jumps. So while Darwin proposed these slow and steady changes, so for example, in the evolution of a horse, you will just have very gradual change in size and in the shape of the horse. What he was saying is, there could be jumps, and every mutation can produce jumps during evolution. And we will discuss how much of this was true and how much this is false, and if there could be a combination between this process. But this idea was completely different to what Darwin proposed. So the idea of large and dramatic changes in a phenotype, and remember, these are discontinuous changes in variation due to a single mutation, and he considered that these were the driving force of evolution. And this is how new species took place. And he was not the only one who studied this idea. Many scientists found these sudden changes during evolution. So I might ask you this question in one of your tests or your quizzes, the difference between the theory of Darwin and the theory of Hugo Dubreeth. So remember, for Dubreeth, evolution results from mutations, while for Darwin results from variation. And right now, maybe for us, they are complementing each other, but at that time they considered that they were different. For him, evolution was considered sudden, and for Darwin, it was considered gradual. Now we can see that actually both can take place at the same time. And finally, mutations are random and directionless, while for Darwin, variations are small and they are directional. So three main differences that I might ask you in the test. So for Darwin, during time, the morphological diversity would look like this, a very gradual change, while for Hugo de Vries, the changes will look very different. They will have jumps and jumps and more jumps. And the interesting thing is that they have been found many examples. These are a type of ships that display one mutation, and with this one mutation, you can see these examples that the legs get very short. And if we study, for example, the evolution of dogs, we can see that these kind of mutations have happened also in dogs and can happen in many animals. And if you remember the examples of albine animals, the mutations can also happen at the same time in similar places during evolution, and you can have albine animals. So more than being discredited, this theory started getting strength from different sources. However, to some degree, the people that considered that Darwin was right were against this theory of mutation. And later I will show you that they actually complement each other. And although the people that considered that the mutation theory was right and that the other one was wrong, actually in the long term, what they did is they fused each other, and the theory of evolution got even stronger using the mutation theory because the source of variation were mutations. So although right now both are together, in the beginning some of them they were considered that they were opposites. Now let's summarize all the things that we have talked. The first thing that I told you is that pangenesis, it was a highly influential theory on the life of Hugo Dubreeth. So the book of Theory of Pangenesis play a key role in the ideas of Hugo Dubreeth. And this interesting fact, remember pangenes was shortened 20 years later to the word genes, that is the one that we use. And remember, when we talk about Darwin and when we talk about Hugo Dubreeth, they have things in common. So both consider that organisms change over time. However, Darwin considered that those changes were gradual, while Hugo Dubreeth considered that those changes show saltations. And why he considered those things? Because he was studying this plant. So remember, both Darwin and Hugo Dubreeth considered that organisms change over time. However, Hugo Dubreeth considered that the changes they were not gradual, but they were big jumps during evolution. And he studied these plants, and remember that based on the changes on one generation, he coined this term, mutation. And so I might ask this question, a model organism that he used, and that he coined this term mutations. And remember, these were not actually mutations. There was another phenomenon, but it was interesting that he made this conceptual approach that it was very important. And he inspired also many scientists. And although I didn't talk today about this, I just want to tell you that we are going to study in the future classes a scientist called Thomas Morgan, that he was studying an organism that is fruit flies, and they allowed to find that genes were located on chromosomes. And this was very important. And not only that, he found that in these structures called chromosomes, they are able to exchange information, that there were events of crossover. So remember, Hugo Dubreeth inspired Thomas Morgan to study mutations, and he did it in fruit flies. I might ask you these questions. And he found something, a process called recombination, that two chromosomes exchange pieces of DNA.